Hello Math 130 students, we are going to pick up on page 8, which is going to be multiplying polynomials. So for part A, we're going to multiply a monomial and multiply a polynomial by a monomial. So here we're just going to distribute. So we really want to pay attention to what are the coefficients. So here the coefficient is 4 and -3, they're going to be multiplied together. So I can even go ahead and write that as 4 times a -3, and I also have the x times the x squared. Remember that multiplication is commutative. So 2 times 3 is the same as 3 times 2. So it doesn't matter in what order it happens because multiplication, it doesn't matter. So when I rearrange this, all this is saying is multiplication. So now I can multiply 4 times -3, which is a -12. And here you can think of that x as an exponent of 1. So with these exponents, I'm going to add them together. So 1 plus 2 is going to give me a 3. So my final answer is -12x to the 3. Okay. Same thing with number 2. So we are going to take this positive 2x and you are going to multiply it to everything inside the parentheses. So when you do that, and remember you can think of that coefficient if it's not there as a 1. So you have 2 times 1, which is a 2, and you have your x to the 3rd power minus 2 times 3, which is a 6, x times x, which is x squared, plus 2 times 5, which is a 10, and you have your x. So you have your 2x to the 3rd minus 6x squared plus 10x. Now for number 3, you might have to go a little bit more carefully because all of this is exactly one term. So it's going to get multiplied here, here, and here. So now I'm going to say, okay, 2 times 5, which is my 10. If I look at my p's, p5 plus p2 is going to give me p7, and I have a q to the 5th power. So that takes care of my first term. Now, if I'm thinking about my second term then, 2 times -3 is a -6, p to the 5 plus 1 is 6, q to the 5 plus 1 is 6 as well. And then for the last one, 2 times -2 is a -4, p5, q5 plus q2 is going to be a q7. So your final answer is 10 p7 q5 minus 6 p6 q6 minus 4 p to the 5th and q to the 7th for my final answer. Okay. And for this one, again, I can rewrite this. This is really saying -1 times y times a -3/8 times a y to the 3rd power. So I'm going to rearrange it so that the numbers are together. So we have our -1 and our -3/8 that's being multiplied. And we also have our y and a y to the 3rd. So if I were to multiply the coefficients here, well, a negative times a -3/8, that would give me a +3/8. And my y, you can think of it as a y to the 1 and y to the 3. So when I add that, 3 plus 1 is going to give me a 4. So my answer should be 3/8 times y to the 4th power. Now, when we're multiplying two binomials, we can either use the FOIL method or the box method. If we do the FOIL method, that's the first, outer, inner, last. So for example, we're going to use FOIL for number 1 and number 2. So if I do FOIL, remember, we're going to work for our first. So the first thing in the parentheses times the first thing in the parentheses. So a times 10a is going to give me a 10a squared. So now if I do my outer, a times -3 is going to be a -3a. And then if I do my inner, that's going to be a positive 60a. And when I do my last, 6 times negative 3 is going to give me a negative 18. So now I know that I can combine these two middle terms in here. So I have my 10a squared, negative 3a, plus my 60a, which is going to give me a positive 57a minus 18 as my final answer. Now, another way to do FOIL, if I'm thinking about my first, that's the first in the parentheses times the first in parentheses, so that's going to give me a 2x squared. Now, when I think about my outer, I can think about my outer this way, so that's a negative 10x. I can also think about my inner, and my inner would be a negative 1x. And now for your last, with the last thing inside the parentheses, that's going to be a positive 5. So it really doesn't matter if you think about it as, you know, kind of like these rainbow things in part A, or if you think about it in part 2, and maybe if I draw it a little bit nicer, you would see that it's going to be more of a heart situation. Okay. So now I can combine like terms, so that would be that negative 10x and that negative 1x. So everything else stays the same. So 2x squared minus 11x plus 5. So that ends up becoming my final simplified answer using FOIL. And there's two ways to represent FOIL here. Now, if I'm using the box method, maybe you don't like FOIL. Maybe you're just like, I just need a different way. That's fine. There is a different way. I can write it in a box to help me be organized. So I would have 4c, and I have my positive 1. So notice how I just wrote the first polynomial going across. Now I'm going to write the second polynomial going down. So I have my 3c, and I have a positive 2. So now I'm going to multiply as if it were a multiplication table chart. So 4 times 3 is 12, c times c is c squared. I have 3c times 1, so that's a 3c. 4 times 2 is an 8, and I have my c. And 2 times 1 is a 2. And the cool thing about this is that usually your diagonal, those are going to be your like terms, so you can add these things together. So you can add your 8c plus your 3c. So this ends up becoming my 12c squared. I have my positive 8c, and my positive 3c, and a positive 2. And like I said, we're going to be combining those two middle terms. So I have a 12c squared. 8 plus 3 is going to give me a positive 11c plus 2. And that ends up becoming my final answer. So let's go ahead and try the box method again, just to make sure that we are comfortable with that. So again, I'm going to write the first polynomial going across. So that would be my 2u, and I have a positive 7v. Going down, I would have a u, and I also have a negative 2v. So when I multiply, I would have a 2u squared, a positive 7uv, a negative 4uv, and a negative 14v squared. And again, I can see that these two middle terms are going to be added together. So I have a 2u squared. If I just want to go ahead and add them together now, since those are like terms, they both end with a u and a v, I can do that. So negative 4uv plus a 7uv That'll give me a positive 3uv. And I have my negative 14v squared. And that's about as simplified as I can get. So that's going to be my final answer. So I really wanted to just point out that when you multiply a binomial times a binomial, the FOIL method is fine and the box method is fine as well. So it's really up to the student and which one you prefer. Now, when I'm multiplying a polynomial by a polynomial, meaning it's more than just a monomial or binomial, then for myself, I like to use the box method, so that way my stuff is organized. So I'm going to use the box method using my 3x squared, my positive 9x, and my positive 10. And going down, I have an x, and I have a positive 10. So now when I multiply, I have a 3x to the 3, I have a 9x squared, and I have a 10x. And in my second row, I would have a 30x squared plus a 90x, and 10 times 10 would give me a 100. So what's nice about this is that your diagonals can be added together. So you do have your 3x cubed plus 9x squared plus your 10x. And the way that it's set up, you can write it as plus your 30x squared plus your 90x plus your 100. So now you know that this is going to be 3x cubed plus 39x squared plus 100x plus 100. So your final answer, 3x cubed plus 39x squared plus 100x plus 100, ends up becoming your final answer. And so I'm going to do the exact same thing with number 2. So I'm going to have going across my 4u squared, negative 5u, and a negative 4. And going down, I'm going to have my 5u, as well as my negative 6. So when I multiply across, 5 times 4 is a 20. U squared and u is u to the third. Now I have a negative 25u squared and a negative 20u. Using my second row, I'm going to have a negative 6 times 4, which is a negative 24u squared, negative 6 times a negative 5, which is a positive 30u, and a negative 6 times a negative 4, which is going to be a positive 24. So again, what's really nice is that your diagonals, when you use the box method, are going to line up nicely. So now I have my 20u to the 3 minus 25u squared minus 20u. And my second row, I have that negative 24u squared plus my 30u plus my 24. So I'm going to get 20u to the 3, negative 25u squared minus 24u squared. So it's going to give me a negative 49u squared. Negative 20u plus 30u is equal to a positive 10u plus 24. So that's exactly going to be my final answer. 20u to the 3 minus 49u squared plus 10u plus 24. Okay. And continuing on with section 4.3, we have special products. So I guess you can say that this is going to be my point or my part B, right? Special products of binomials and multiplying polynomial functions. So for example, I have f of x and I have g of x. I want to find the multiplication of f and g with respect to x, and I also want to see the multiplication of f and g with respect to -1 when -1 is equal to x. So let's look at that for a moment. So part A, this is really saying that your f of x is going to be multiplied by your g of x function. So you are multiplying f of x times your g of x. So let's say my f of x is here, so it's my blue function. And I'm going to have my g of x as my purple function. And what am I doing? I am multiplying these two functions together. So if I write my f of x, that would be my 3x squared plus 8x minus 7. It's being multiplied by my g function, which I'm calling my 5x plus 5. For myself, what I would do here is I would do the box method. So doing the box method, I would have a 3x squared plus 8x minus 7 and a 5x and a positive 5. So when I do that, I end up getting 15x to the third, 40x squared. 5 times -7 is a -35x. And down below, my second row, I would have a 15x squared. 5 times 8 is a 40x, and -7 times 5 is your -35. And remember, your diagonals are going to be added together. So you'd have a 15x to the third power. You would have a positive 15 plus a positive 40. This is going to give you a positive 55x squared. A positive 40 minus 35, which is a positive 5x, and a negative 35. So that ends up becoming my final answer for part A of this problem. Now for part B, this is saying find f of x times g of x when x is equal to a -1. Well, we already found f of x times g of x. We found that from part A. From part A, we found that that was a 15x cubed plus a 55x squared plus 5x minus 35. So now, if we let x equal to -1, I am going to get that this is a 15x to the third power plus 55x squared plus a 5x minus 35. And I'm plugging in a -1. So I'm just going to plug this into my calculator. And I end up getting that this is going to be equal to 15. So now I can tell you that f times g of -1 is equal to a positive 15. It ends up becoming my final answer. And in case you guys were wondering, like, how the heck did that happen, we do have a second example to try to help you. So we have our f, we have our g. We want to find f times g with respect to x for part A. So we know that we have our f of x, and we are multiplying by a g of x. So let's say our f of x is going to be green this time. So my green function. And I also have my g of x, which is going to be my purple function. So my f function is that x squared plus 3x minus 6. That's going to get multiplied by that purple fraction, which is a -5x minus 3. So using the box method, I'm going to have x squared plus a positive 3x minus 6, a negative 5x, and a negative 3. So when I multiply the first row together, I get a negative 5x3, negative 15x squared, and a positive 30x. Down below, I get a negative 3x squared, negative 9x, and negative 3 times a negative 6 is a positive 18. And the lovely thing about this is that I made a mistake, and I'm very easily able to see what my mistake is. My mistake was here on my exponent. If this is a negative 3 times a positive x squared, that's going to be a negative 3x squared. So that's a perfect way of letting you know that if your diagonals aren't adding up with the same terms, just go back and double check that you haven't written anything. So now I can say that f times g with respect to x is equal to that negative 5x cubed. I have a negative 3x squared minus a 15x squared, which is a negative 18x squared, a negative 9x plus a positive 30x, which is a positive 21x, and a positive 18. So then for part A, that becomes my final answer. Now for part B, remember what this is saying. This is saying f of x times g of x when x is equal to 0. And we already did f of x times your g of x. That was from part A. We have found out that that was a negative 5x cubed minus 18x squared plus a 21x plus 18. So when they tell us this is for when x is equal to 0, well, I have a negative 5 minus 18 plus 21, and I'm plugging in a 0. So if I'm plugging in 0, 0 times anything is just 0. So I end up getting that this is equal to a positive 18. So now I can say that f times g with respect to 0 is equal to a positive 18. That ends up becoming my final answer. Okay. That is the end of section 4.3. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to email me or the Math Success Center or the tutor. Thank you.